Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to this special boom or bust edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. This time, we're going to go back 2 years and look at the top 10 hottest cards at that moment and see how they're doing today. If you bought those cards then, would you be happy now, or would you be kicking yourself for losing money? Quickly before we get into this week's 10 cards, just a fast reminder, if you go to FlipsideGaming.com, you can use the Heroes promo code to save 10% on orders over $10. Currently, you can pre-order Commander Masters products there. The preview season has just kicked off. Some spicy cards already revealed. But if you're more into standard sets, you can also pre-order Wilds of Eldraine there as well. Plus, they have a whole lot of other things on their website. Remember, if your order's over $100 or consists only of singles, shipping will be free in the United States. Also, whenever you use the Heroes promo code, it does support the channel, which is always appreciated. So thank you. And without any further ado, let's get into it. Alright, fire up the flux capacitor. 2 years ago, our number 10 card was Sea Hunter from Nemesis. It was up $2.19 to $9.98 for a 28% increase. At the time, it was seeing increased commander play and builds around a card from the recently released Modern Horizons 2 set, Svelin of Sea and Sky. Today, this card still sees commander play, usually in Kumina Tyrant of Araska decks, but currently this is part of the list subset. It's there with Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, and it was in the list for 3 previous sets as well. Overall though, this is just a situation where there are more copies out there and lower demand, so you guessed it, this one is a bust. In the last 2 years, it's gone down 646 to 352. That's a 65% decrease. 2 years ago, number 9 was Arcbound Reclaimer. This went up 243 to 613 for a 66% increase back then. And it was getting additional commander play in Zabaz the Glimmerwasp builds. That was another new card from the Modern Horizons 2 set. Also, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms previews had just completed at the time, and a lot of players were interested in putting this card in commander builds around something that was previewed from there, Oswald Fiddlebender. Now in 2023, this still has not been reprinted, and it's still in Zabaz commander builds, among others, including at times in decks around Gandalf the White, which is from Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. But honestly, there's not the same amount of commander hype around this card today compared to 2 years ago, so this one is also a bust. It went down $1.46 over the last 2 years to $4.67. That is a 24% decrease. Number 8, 2 years ago, was Necrotic Ooze from Scars of Mirrodin. It was up $2.55 to $7.19 for a 55% increase. Worth noting too, at the time there was a copy already reprinted in the Prime Slime Secret Lair. Back then it was seeing commander play in the Mimeoplasm builds, among others, and Adventures in the Forgotten Realms previews had just shown us some support for the Ooze tribe. But the biggest catalyst at the time for this jump was one preview card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms in particular. That was Osmodius the Archfiend. In fact, there was a Tolarian Community College video at the time mentioning how the two cards could play well together, which might have brought some more attention to this then. Fast forward to 2 years later, and this card did get another reprint in Double Masters, still sees commander play in some builds including the Mimeoplasm, but the build you see it the most in is Carrick, Son of Yawgmoth. So what's the verdict on this one? Well, it's another bust. It went down $5.22 over the last 2 years to $1.97. That's a 73% decrease. Again, it's a useful commander card, but it just doesn't have the same hype today that it did back then. And of course, that reprinting contributed to this as well. Number 7, 2 years ago, was Alpine Moon from Core Set 2019. It was up $2.73 to $4.72 for a 137% increase. Back then, this was getting a little bit of Pioneer and Legacy play and a tad bit of commander play, but Modern Horizons 2 had been released about a month before this, and the Modern meta was going through a big shakeup. Since many players were building new Modern decks or adjusting what they already had, commonly played sideboard cards like this one started to take off. Remember too, at the time, there were decks running some key lands. Some Rakdos midrange builds ran Shinka the Blood-Soaked Keep and Shizo Death's Storehouse, plus a bunch of decks were running Inkmoth Nexus then, like Hammer Time, Hardened Scales Infect, and Affinity, and many players were trying the new Urza Saga for Modern Horizons 2 in a lot of different decks. Today this card still sees a little sideboard play, but metas are very different today compared to 2 years ago. In Modern, it's in Jeskai Prowess, Jund Saga, and some other sideboards there. Additionally, it's been reprinted in the list. It is in the list subset for Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth now, and it was there for 4 previous sets as well. So, put it all together, and yes, this one is also a bust. down $2.85 over the last 2 years to $1.87. That's a 60% decrease. There it is. 2 years ago, number 6 was Inkmoth Nexus from Mirrodin Besieged. It was up $5.12 to $39.96. That was a 15% increase. Back then, there were a couple harder to find reprints of the card too. It was a World Magic Cup qualifier promo, and it was in the full sleeves, the tattoo pack secret layer. As we just mentioned, at that time the card was seeing a lot of play in Modern and multiple decks, and it was also seeing Legacy play in Infect. Plus, it was getting more play in Commander in those Zabaz builds too. Today, you don't see the card used as much as you did back then, but it's still getting play in Modern Hammer Time, which is very popular. It's in Hardened Scales as well as Infect there too. It's still in Legacy Infect and gets some Commander play, but since then it was reprinted in another secret layer, Phyrexian Faves. So we have another bust here. This is down $10.37 to $29.59 over the last 2 years. That's a 26% decrease. Number 5 2 years ago was Retrofitter Foundry from Commander 2018. It was up $5.18 to $40.72 for a 15% increase. This card was seeing more Legacy play with a meta shift that occurred after the release of Modern Horizons 2 back then. It was in Jeskai Standstill, Azorius as well as Mono Blue Affinity, Ninjas, and more. Plus, it was getting additional Commander play and builds around a card for Modern Horizons 2, Lonus Cryptozoologist, and many wanted to put it in future Commander builds around the recently previewed Oswald Fiddlebender. Today, maybe it isn't seeing as much Legacy play as it did back then, but it's still in Cephalid Breakfast, Mono White Hammer Time, and Ninjas. When it comes to Commander, this really doesn't get much play there anymore. It can show up in a build occasionally, like Urza Chief Artificer for example. It is also one of the 2023 Judge foils, but typically those printings don't have a big impact on card prices for the existing copies. So where's this card today? Well, it's another bust. This is down $27.15 over the last 2 years to $13.57 for a 67% decrease. There were some high expectations for this card 2 years ago, especially when it came to Commander. 2 years ago, number 4 was Notion Thief. The Dragon's Maze copy was up $5.10 to $6.92. That was a 280% increase. The Zendikar Rising Commander copy from the Sneak Attack deck was up $6.34 to $8.16. That was a 348% increase. And the Masters 25 copy was up $6.98 to $8.99. That was a 347% increase. Okay, so back then this was in Pioneer Niv to Light, and it was also a very popular Commander card. But there's a little more to it than just that. You might remember that 2 years ago was when Hull Breacher was banned in Commander, and many players needed a quick replacement for that card in their builds. This was that replacement for many players. In fact, the similarity between the two cards was discussed on the Command Zone podcast back then, so that might have brought some eyes to this as well. Also, there was an Adventures in the Forgotten Realms preview card that some Commander players wanted to build around and add Notion Thief. The card was Xanathar Guild Kingpin. Fast forward to today, and this is still seeing a ton of Commander play. Many are even getting this now to put in a couple Commander builds around cards from the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth main set, Sauron the Dark Lord, and Saruman in many colors. But this was reprinted in the Lord of the Rings Commander deck called the Hosts of Mordor. Sure, it does see some play in fresh builds around cards from that deck too, but there are many more copies in circulation, so let's see what happened. It is a bust yet again. The Dragon's Maze copy down $5.03 to $1.89 over the last 2 years. That's a 73% decrease. The Zendikar Rising Commander copy down $6.54 to $1.62. That's an 80% decrease. And the Masters 25 copy down $6.12 to $2.87 for a 68% decrease. The reprint did make these copies lose a little value recently, but really this had fallen off shortly after the spike 2 years ago and has been declining since, basically because all that hype waned. 2 years ago, our number 3 card was Primal Beyond. It was up $7.52 to $18.46 for a 69% increase. At the time, this was a Morningtide rare that was yet to be reprinted, and it still is actually. And if you watched the videos back then, you know that Morningtide was from a time period in Magic where there just wasn't as many packs cracked because there was a recession in the game. So when there's some attention on rares from that time period, they tend to get a little spiky. So why were players interested in this back then? Well, it was getting a little Commander play, but the shakeup in the modern meta for Modern Horizons 2 was the reason this was so hot. It was appearing in 5-color elementals there. Today, you don't see this in Modern, you barely see it in Commander. Sometimes this is in Horde of Notions decks, but I think you see where this is going. It is another bust. Down $15.05 over the last 2 years to $3.41. That's an 82% decrease. 2 years ago, number 2 was Shattering Spree. The Mystery Booster copy was up $246 to $18.99. That's a 15% increase. The Guild Pack copy was up $927 to $24.98 for a 59% increase. And the Guilds of Ravnica is a Guild Kit copy was up $24.64 to $39.99. That was a 160% increase. So back then, this was another card seeing additional modern sideboard play in that new modern meta. Many decks were running the new Urza's Saga, and also a lot were leaning on artifacts harder at the time. This was a good option against Hammer Time, Amulet Titan, Urza's Kitchen, Hell's Kitchen, Stoneblade builds, Affinity, Hardened Scales, and more. And it also was continuing to see play in Legacy and Vintage. A couple years ago, you'd see it in Commander, sometimes too, in Mono Red builds, but it was also getting additional Commander play and builds around a new card for Modern Horizons 2, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. I wonder whatever happened to that card. So fast forward to today, this hasn't been reprinted in the last 2 years, but this isn't seeing nearly as much modern play in the current meta. It can still appear in mono red aggro sideboards. I haven't seen much of this in Legacy, but it still shows up in sideboards of Jeskai Control and Underworld Breach in Vintage. Commander, yeah, it's seeing less play there too. It can show up in decks like Ragavan or Veyran Voice of Duality, for example, but it is not a card you see much of overall in the format. One other thing to keep in mind too, like I said, it wasn't reprinted in the last 2 years, but Wizards has released more Mystery Booster Convention Edition boxes in their Festival in a Box Secret Layers, so add it all up, and yeah, this one is also a bust. The Mystery Booster copy has gone down $13.83 over the last 2 years to $516, that's a 73% decrease. The Guild Pack copy down $19.16 to $582 for a 77% decrease, and the Guilds of Ravnica is a Guild Kit copy went down $34.36 to $563 for an 86% decrease. And 2 years ago, our number 1 card was Opalescence. It was going up a whopping $43 to $76.99 for a 127% increase. So this was seeing increased Commander play at the time thanks to, again, a new card for Modern Horizons 2. It was in builds around Sithis Harvest's Hand. But this is a reserve list card, and a lot of this jump can be attributed to speculation based on the increased interest in the card for gameplay. Today, there's not as much speculation and reselling going on in the market, and sure, this can still show up in Sithis Harvest Hand Commander decks, or in Go Shintai of Life's Origin builds, for example, but overall, this doesn't see much play. So, do we have a complete sweep here? Yeah, this week we do. This is down $59.21 to $17.78 over the last 2 years. That's a 77% decrease. So in the end, what's the damage here? Well, if you went ahead and you bought all 14 cards featured today, remember you had 10 cards in our top 10, but there were 3 copies of both Shattering Spree and Notion Thief for a total of 14. The cards would have cost you $312.18 if you just bought 1 copy of each of those cards. What would those same cards cost you today? $99.37. That's a difference of $212.81 you would have lost. Overall, that's a 68% decrease. So yeah, 2 years ago was kind of the sweet spot. The beginning of 2021 is where the market just went crazy. Cards were just jumping all over the place. And I do think you have to go into this realizing that when we look at 2 years back, you're going to see some pretty major losses most of the time. Not just even because cards are reprinted, that does happen of course, but a lot of the cards in today's video weren't brought down because of reprints. It was really just the changes we saw in the marketplace, especially when it comes to the amount of speculation that was going on and the amount of reselling that was going on. Anyway, as I say at the end of all these videos, don't buy into the hype. Be careful, do your research. We'll be back this weekend for our regular episode of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch, where we deep dive into everything that's happening in the secondary market today. Until then though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.